Good afternoon, everybody. And a really big thank you to Chris Looney to do a reprise of his presentation that he did at our April general membership meeting. So with that, I am going to turn this over to Chris.
Well, thank you, Michelle, and thank you for having me back for an encore performance of Major Gifts, Theory and Practice. It probably doesn't surprise any of you to know that this is not an uncommon presentation for someone like myself to make. And so I'm happy to do it. And I'm actually kind of excited that it might become a part of the AFP library for the future. I've often thought about my legacy and how I can make sure that the sort of the name and the work has staying power. And there's not many ways to do that unless you name buildings, right? As we all know, or you can get yourself recorded in a library like this. So I'll try to cover as many different topics as I can over the next 20 years or so. And that way I can be assured that people will remember me in some way. But I'm happy to be talking to all of you about Major Gifts. At the time that we were doing this presentation for the meeting, we were split into two groups. My group was the sort of 101 introductory overview course, Theory and Practice of Major Gifts. Not necessarily a lot of things that practitioners in development, major gift officers wouldn't know. But it's always a good reminder and an opportunity to refresh your thinking on the topic. So there were a number of people that were very experienced in that meeting who I hope benefited from the reminder, from the refresher, from the tip here or there. The other section was on more advanced practice and theory in major gifts. And so, I hope that I'm not wasting anybody's time by telling you all these things that you already know. Apologies if things do seem a bit elementary, but I always love the fact that even the most experienced development professionals need a bit of a refresher course to kind of get them back toward the North Star of fundraising on occasion, because as good as we all are, we tend to drift a little bit into bad habits or activities that don't actually generate the dollars, even though that might be our principal role. So I have this slide talking about me and who I am, and that's not all that important, but I would just say that I've been kicking around Orange County now, well, my whole life, yes, but in the development profession as a consultant for 23 years, all with CCS, and was very fortunate to have two parents who both have and continue to have long careers in development and fundraising, and introduced me to this profession and introduced me to CCS. And my passion for the work just continues. It was a very quick sort of romance with CCS and the clients we serve, and I've sort of stayed committed to the firm and to the work ever since. Just so excited about getting up every day and helping to raise money for such amazing causes as all of you are pursuing. And the firm has been around for quite a long time. We're going to be coming up on our 75th anniversary here real quick. And over those years, I've had the opportunity nationally and internationally to serve all types of nonprofits across every sector, and in just about every geography in the country and sometimes the world. So we're very fortunate and feel very blessed to be able to help a variety of clients. And I would say that we're best known for our campaign management, and in that work, obviously, you get exposure to the practice of major gifts. And so what I'm sharing with you are things that I've come to learn and know through experience, but also the work and education that I've received from so many colleagues and friends in the business over time. So let me share with you what I know and what I think. And as Michelle mentioned, don't hesitate to break in with questions at any time. I love engagement and dialogue, so it's not in any way going to stymie the conversation if you break in with questions. I invite those anytime. Today, what we're going to really be focused on is reviewing some principles and best practices for major gifts, addressing some strategies for developing major gift portfolios, looking at moves management and how to develop prospect pipelines, and then talk a little bit about the structure and implementation of major gift requests and all that's involved in securing those, stewarding those, and positioning yourselves to receive more of those in the future. So doesn't it feel appropriate to start the conversation by defining a major gift? I think it's funny that often people don't pause to think about what's involved when you hear the word or phrase major gift. Everybody puts it into their own context. If I am a major gift officer at a major educational institution, to me, that might mean 6-figure, 7-figure gift. If I'm working with a startup organization or a relatively young philanthropic organization in the community, they might tell me that their major gift is $1,000. And both of them are true. Both of them are major gifts within the context for which you're talking. And where I would define major gift is not by size, but actually by method and impact. By method in terms of work that's done to personally and more strategically cultivate a relationship and generate an ask that is done in a more personal and meaningful way. And secondarily, by impact, the gift should be of a size that actually makes a difference and helps move the organization forward in an impactful way toward better achieving their mission and vision. So let's throw out what we know or think we know about a major gift as being something tied to an amount, and let's focus instead on how that gift is pursued and the difference that it makes to the institution. Some have asked me, why does it even matter? Why do we focus on major gifts? And these are people often that have not necessarily been around in fundraising or nonprofit work for a long time. I suppose these are the same people that talk to me about raising $10 million through a major campaign and start saying, well, if we could just get 100,000 people in the community to each give, right? And you just got to honor that and say, what a great opportunity for education. And, major gifts is that way to make an extraordinary impact with less maybe work, or so more efficiency in terms of the fundraising returns. We all know or have heard about the cost effectiveness of major gift fundraising, often pennies on the dollar raised when compared to, let's say, special event revenue or direct mail or direct response revenue, which comes at a substantially higher cost for the dollar raised. So major gifts can be impactful because it's efficiently raised. Also, it has huge impact, huge returns. So we talk about major gifts as having the opportunity to more quickly accomplish goals. How wonderful it is to think about the opportunity to secure $100,000 within weeks to do something important, when by most methods, it would take months and months, if not years, to accomplish that same goal. And lastly, I've seen nothing in terms of what creates momentum and confidence for an initiative, for an effort within an organization than receiving major gifts. Things that were thought to be impossible, when a major gift is received or something substantial toward that particular goal comes in, all of a sudden, everybody is joining the band of believers. And oftentimes, it's those initial major gifts that inspire future major gifts. The demonstration of confidence in the institution or the project or the people is momentum building, inspiring. And so we often think of major gifts as a way to build all the confidence and momentum we need. And often major gifts are the types of things that help create opportunities with other types of giving. How often have you seen a matching gift program where someone offers $50,000 or $100,000 and is willing to match that dollar for dollar, right? So suddenly you might have a major gift that then influences an equal amount of support from hundreds, if not thousands, of other donors. So there's just a lot of rationale for why major gifts are important and necessary. The challenge, I suppose, is that major gifts are not easy to come by. Not necessarily easy to come by. There are always outlier situations, but most major gifts are given by people that have capacity. They're making these gift decisions because they're able to afford to give money away in more significant amounts. And these pictures are kind of ridiculous because wouldn't we all love to have the opportunity to receive support from the richest Americans, including Jeff Bezos, Bill Gates, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You all know who these people are. And I put all their faces up here, not because I thought that you had a realistic opportunity to secure support from more than one or two of them in your career, but because they represent people who come with them significant challenges in terms of their philanthropic decision-making. And what I would say is that the individuals that make major gifts are complicated, like we all are. They have different motivations, they have different interests, they have different relationships. So it's incredibly important to make sure that we acknowledge that this isn't easy work, that there's thought and strategy that goes into the work with major gifts. And I could be speaking to an individual, I could be speaking to a company, I could be speaking to a foundation or any number of other entities like Rotary could be an example, or a congregation like a church or temple could be a major gift donor. In all of those situations, whether it's an individual or an entity, people are behind the decision, so you have to recognize that. But also there are drivers, there are particular interests, particular relationships that come to play. And I always make this point too, that sort of the wealthier you are, two things happen. The wealthier you are, the smarter you think you are. So you think your ideas are the best. And secondly, the wealthier you are, the thicker the armor is around your heart. And the harder that armor is to penetrate, to really get at someone's emotional response. So those are just some of the challenges that I think about often with sophisticated donors and those that are really capable of making major gifts. So on the screen, you see a bunch of phrases, and this is all true. Today's sophisticated donors are different than yesterday's sophisticated donors and a generation ago. What we're finding is that today's sophisticated donors are really known to be more risk tolerant. They're known to be more engaged in the work. They're known to be very entrepreneurial and often are themselves volunteers. They are looking for impact. You know, these are buzzwords, right? These are all things that I think you've heard or you've known from the recent work maybe that you've done in the major gift setting. But it's interesting to think that 20 years ago, 30 years ago, you could say the words uh, of an organization that you really respect and cared about, and you could make a major gift to that organization because the reputation was so high, because the way you felt about that organization was so significant. Now, you know, there's more, I guess, mistrust, but also there's more of a desire on the part of donors to know more, to understand more, to want to feel a sense of connection to the dollars being invested. And so the same organization that 20 years ago could get $100,000 just for asking for the support of the organization is now building significant proposals about the allocation of those dollars, the impact of those dollars, where it's going to go, what it's going to do, and how the organization is going to measure that, right? So more often the question is, I do like you, but tell me where the money is going to go. There are fewer situations where people would say, I love you, I trust you, here's my money, go for it. Do whatever you think is necessary with it. And that's okay, but it forces us to be a little bit sharper in our approach to the major gift work and not rely on the reputation or history of an organization or even sometimes our relationship with people. We have to go a little bit deeper and further. I mentioned before that people have particular drivers. What do I mean by that? I mean, there's a variety of reasons why people give. I mentioned in the previous presentation that I have a document that I keep and update occasionally with all of the different motivations that I have seen from donors as it relates to individuals, as it relates to corporations, as it relates to foundations. And there are more motivations in the individual category than I found or recorded for corporations and foundations. But nonetheless, there are a substantial number of them. And sometimes there are multiple drivers that are at play with a prospective donor. And a good fundraiser is going to dial into those, is going to know what they are and what they're not. Happy to share that list with anyone. It changes quite frequently, but the list is important because whenever I'm responsible for developing strategy around a major gift request or partnering with someone who's developing strategy, I bring that list out and I try to figure out how much we know about this decision-making individual, what's important to them, what's not. And we definitely know that people like to give when they're asked. They don't give as much or as generously or as often when they're not asked. We know that people often are generous at their core and want to help and be needed. The desire to make a positive difference. Sometimes people give out of tax planning considerations. If I were, a community foundation trying to secure a gift into a donor advised fund, the motivation for that, the rationale for that would be maybe different than the rationale would be an investment in a position within an institution that could accomplish certain things. So, there's also this idea that people, like me, and I said, the whole thing about being in this library and providing a legacy, people want to be remembered. People want to honor other people. So there's all kinds of things at play, and sometimes things that you would assume to be minor drivers for most people are key drivers for others. So you can't dismiss anything, and you can't mock someone or minimize the driver, even though you personally might think it's insignificant. For others, it could be the most important factor in their mind. So just remember, motivations are something that fundraisers, other professionals need to figure out in advance of making that ask. I think it's important to put major gifts in the right context. I think it's often easy or easier for organizations to say, well, if major gifts is so important, then why don't we just exclusively focus on major gifts and dismiss all other types of fundraising? Like, we don't need events. We don't need direct mail if we are a major gift shop, right? Okay, that's one perspective. But I think what you end up doing is missing much of what might be necessary for more significant philanthropy to occur, for there to be a true culture of philanthropy within the institution, and for you to more consistently meet your goals and objectives. Like, I would ask you, where do you think major gifts come from? Do they come from someone that you just call up on the phone and say, hey, I found your name and I thought you'd be a cool major gift donor. Are you interested? No, major gifts come often from relationships, more often with an institution, that have been developed over time. Well, how do you build those relationships with an individual over time? Usually there's a pipeline of gifts that have been developed and given over years through an annual fund. More often than not, major gifts come as the result of years and years and years of consistent giving to an organization's annual fundraising efforts. And when people say, oh, I don't believe in special events, well, easy for them to say if they're not responsible for building a pipeline of friends and donors that can one day be placed into a major gift pipeline. So I don't dismiss special events. I don't dismiss direct response giving. I don't dismiss anything that can confirm to me someone's interest and commitment to an organization. So annual gifts obviously are important to feed a pipeline for major gifts. More often than not, you're going to look at your existing donors to understand the possibilities that might exist within the major gift realm for them. And importantly, major gifts and the making of those often are a stepping stone to someone making a lifetime gift, something that is probably the most substantial gift that they'll make in their lifetime, which might be, let's say, out of assets upon death, or something that's a little more structured for the future. So, it's interesting to me to see major gifts in the context of the bigger picture here. Major gifts doesn't necessarily live outside of a framework for fundraising, or outside of the, I'm looking for the right word, the symbiosis is just what's coming to my head. The ecosystem, I guess, of fundraising. It's very much a part of it, but would have a hard time surviving on its own or without some of these other activities that are most normally associated with fundraising. So now we kind of move into the practice of major gifts, major gift fundraising, and importantly, there has been developed a variety of philosophies about how to secure major gifts more effectively. One of the authors and developers of a theory that is probably most commonly known is David Dunlap, who coined the phrase moves management while he was at Cornell University. And he sort of developed this definition, which you can see on the screen. And importantly, he understood the connection between relationship development and engagement and certain activities and steps that could be taken over time towards securing significant support. I've always gravitated toward a methodical approach toward the pursuit of major gifts. I don't necessarily believe in just winging it and hoping for the best. So having a framework is important. It doesn't always work in the same way that he envisioned at all institutions. There might be more steps, there might be fewer steps necessary, but everybody has steps that they need to take a prospective donor through, or even a donor through, toward that gift. And here you see on the screen a cycle that might be appropriate for you in thinking through your major gift approach. It might not, but I think the first step always is to understand who might be your prospective donors. These would be suspects, not prospects necessarily, but you put a bunch of names on a list and you go through the identification process. You got to learn something about them and do some research. You got to figure out what their interests are, how much they might be able to contribute. Then you start designing the one-on-one strategic approach that you believe would most closely position you well for a successful ask. And there's timeline involved in there. There's people questions involved. Sometimes the people that you've identified know nothing about the organization. Sometimes they are already donors to the organization. Sometimes you might be needing to inform them on particular projects. This is all what comes together in the cultivation and briefing process. Cultivation, I think of more in line with education about the organization and getting them to agree that your mission is important to them. The briefing is more about education of a particular initiative or project. So depending on where some people are, it could take more time in cultivation or more time in briefing, or not much time in either. It really depends on the type of person they are. And so I'm going to say it as categorically as I can. I don't see much one size fits all method in major gift fundraising. That might be possible in other aspects of fundraising, but let's think of major gift fundraising as more customized, more tailored, differentiated, whatever adjectives you want to use, but it's bespoke. And I've only recently adopted that term. I kind of hated it at first because I didn't really know what it meant and felt like fancy people were trying to use it when they didn't know what it meant either, but I've gravitated to it. I know it's a tailoring term, blah, 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 but it's appropriate. It's measuring everyone individually and trying to customize something specifically for them. So the ask, which comes not at the end of this process, but a little toward the back end, the ask is going to be highly customized in these particular settings. But what's funny is, and I say this here, the ask is not the end. The ask is not the most consequential part of this process. It's one important part of a chain, And as we all know, you're only as good as your weakest link. So if you have not done a great job in one of these preceding aspects of the cycle, your odds of success are significantly lessened. So you have to pay attention to these things. Like if you haven't figured out the team, the appropriate solicitors on an ask, then I don't know how you could, necessarily hope to have the best results, right? But importantly, the ask has its place and importance, but is not the end all be all of major gift fundraising. I know plenty of people who are good fundraisers, who succeed more, who are good fundraisers and fail more. But I don't think any of them just picks up the phone and calls someone and asks for a large amount of money without proper preparation. And these same people that are asking money don't often get the response that they want right away. So I would also posit that when you're in this work, making an ask, the work just begins when you make that ask. You got to close. So some people kind of fail to understand that there's lots of opportunities to do strategic work once an ask has been made. Like, can you get that board member to call and say, hey, I heard you met with the CEO today. Certainly would love it if you would think about supporting us in this work. That would be really important, right? Does that help? Does that move you closer to a gift decision? You have to write that thank you note. Have you determined the follow-up strategy? When will you be contacting them next? So there are all kinds of these incredibly important steps that need to take place after the ask to close the gift. Then, there's the time and attention that it takes to properly recognize and steward these gifts. Why? Because I don't know many major gift officers that think of their donors as being one and done. It's sort of one and done for the moment, and then let's repeat step one over and over and over again, right? Get the gift, steward it, get the gift, steward it. And it's not crass to do that. It's not crass. That's what people want. People want to invest. People want to invest in your organization dramatically if they have the capacity and if they've been treated well, shown the impact through proper stewardship, they will desire to make multiple major gifts over their lifetime. And we as major gift officers have that sort of obligation to help them achieve their goals and their capacity to do so over time. I mentioned a minute ago about the need to start building a list. And there are some jobs in the major gift world where you can come into the work and you have a pre-built portfolio, or someone has assigned a portfolio of major gift prospects to you. And in that portfolio, you're going to have a variety of people in various stages of readiness to be asked. They've just made their gift and need to be stewarded. They are in need of being qualified, et cetera, et cetera. Well, that's great. But a lot of places you come into an organization and you say, well, what's my portfolio? And they say, I don't know. Why don't you build one? So a lot of people that are venturing into major gift work, especially organizations that are new into it, haven't done it before, have to start by building their major gift list, their portfolio. So where do you go? I might have mentioned earlier that existing donors are your best prospects. So the first place we start is looking at your donor base and trying to marry that history of giving with wealth capacity through a screening tool or something to try to create the perfect storm of someone that has capacity, meaning wealth, and interest or affinity, right? When you have the two of them, then all of a sudden you probably have a major gift prospect. So that's a good place to start. Board members and other volunteers are often great major gift prospects. There are donors that are giving large amounts to organizations that have a similar mission to yours, maybe even within the same community or region. There are lots of ways to source prospective donors to build your major gift portfolio. One way or another, though, you got to build it, and it's got to be large enough so that you have the capacity to reach whatever goal that you might be tasked to meet. And let's remember too that within the major gift work, there are all kinds of people that are meant to have their own portfolios. So you might be asked to build a portfolio for the CEO. You might be asked to build a portfolio for yourself. You might be asked to build a portfolio for the board chair. I don't know. But the reality is that there can be multiple portfolios that are created for a variety of different people who are connected to the work. And maybe your responsibility is to be the hub and spoke of this strategy where you're keeping accountability for all of these other people. And you might have a certain number of people that you're responsible for working with directly yourself. I've seen organizations where major gift portfolios have been as large as 100 or 200 people, which means that one person is managing the relationships with 100 to 200 people over the course of the year, every day, working on that portfolio to move people to the next step, right? So if they're currently in the qualification stage, we're trying to determine if they are a real viable prospect. You might be taking a cultivation step or a briefing step, or you might get the ask out, or you might send the impact report to them. So a portfolio is going to have all kinds of different stages in it, but ultimately that portfolio's responsibility is on usually you or that person that owns it to push people through the cycle, advance them to the next stage in a reasonable and often accelerated timeline, okay? So when you have all of those names, the next challenge that I often kind of discover is that you don't know much about them. Even the ones maybe that are historic donors or long-term donors to the institution. Like, how did they even find your organization in the first place? Who are they connected to? Why do they keep giving? Where's their wealth from? Do they have any other ties to the institution? Do they support other organizations philanthropically? Where do you stack up in that? What does their wealth screening suggest is their capacity? If there was a strong relationship that exists, who is it with? All of these are important areas to understand and know in order to, as I said before, create the right strategy and approach to your major gift donors. So whereas you need to have a lot of people in a portfolio to succeed, the other part is you need to know a lot about these people that are in your portfolio to succeed. And it's not enough to know a lot about 10% of your portfolio. You actually need to know a lot about 90% of your portfolio. And it's okay to push people out of your portfolio as often as it is okay to pull new people into your portfolio. Your portfolio is highly dynamic, right? It's never the same day to day. It always changes. Why? Because you just moved someone from point A to point B, or someone just told you that they never want you to call them again, or someone just lost their business and have declared bankruptcy. This is like it's hard. Like you don't want to necessarily say, oh, I'm sorry, but you can't make a major gift anymore, but I'm still going to keep you in your portfolio. You know, you can still keep them as friends, but you know, there's a point at which you have to cull and prune, and in order to grow, right? So it's an evolutionary process. Major gifts is a lot of work to prune, to grow, and all of that. And you know, one of the things that you'll soon discover when you do this research work and qualification work and exploratory work with your donors is that you know, they're not all major gift prospects, and that's okay. You know, we consider a major gift prospect to be someone, as I mentioned earlier, who has high capacity and high affinity, right? That's the ideal candidate for a major gift ask and to be making major gifts. You know, there's even possibilities with high capacity and low affinity to secure major gift support. I have seen a number of times where an organization who really wasn't that significantly on the radar screen has received a major gift because someone came into their life who just took an interest. Point of example, you know, Mackenzie Bezos's great philanthropy that was spread across so many different organizations. I know for a fact that she did not know intimately these organizations, right? There was very low affinity. The only connection was sort of areas of focus and some interests, but the organizations themselves, that was low affinity. But marry that with high capacity, extremely high capacity, and some magic can really happen. So the good news too is that even if you have low affinity, that's something that you can continue to build and foster. Here's the challenge. You can never make someone with low capacity have high capacity, right? So in this work that we do, it's just sometimes good to understand that basic reality and eliminate those that have low capacity in this work because you know you have to be targeted. You can't necessarily take a machine gun approach to this work. You have to really be a sharpshooter in the work that you're doing here. So let's jump into some of the considerations that exist as you approach a major gift ask, and some of the things that you'll really want to be mindful of as you pull together your strategy. The first thing that I often look to is previous giving history. You know, is there a strong history of giving to the institution? What is it? What does it look like? There's also the giving to other institutions. So if I'm approaching a campaign and I need to sequence prospective donors across a table of gifts or a gift pyramid or whatever you might call it, I might say, well, this person has capacity, but do they have the history of giving a seven-figure gift? And if I could find that history somewhere else, like for example, they gave a seven-figure gift to another institution that I would say is at a similar priority level for that individual, I might begin to feel more comfortable assigning a seven-figure request level for that individual. You know, the research that you would do to find out connections and whether there's an interest in the particular program that you are raising money for. Those are incredibly important. What do you know about the right timetable? Are they in the process of selling their business and now is not the right time for them to make a decision? Are there personal issues going on that interfere? Did they just come away from a windfall event, which makes urgency important? All those things need to be figured out, as does your entire rationale for the gift request. what's the impact? What's it for? How much is it going to be? How does that gift fit into the broader need for philanthropy? Does it need to include a challenge or matching component? Are there other donors that would help inspire that person if they were known to be associated with the effort? All of those kinds of things need to be figured out. You don't want to necessarily walk into a situation where you have a lot of holes in your strategy. You want to button all of those things up as best you can. In terms of thinking about who's going to be actively involved in the cultivation and solicitation of this particular individual. Who is the person that is potentially highly influential with this person, who is respected by this person, or family, I should say, whoever the decision maker is. Oftentimes these days we are approaching families as a unit, and family offices, and making presentations to extended families. And so you got to think about who's going to be in the room from their side and who's going to be in the room from your side as well. So I also wonder who you're going to engage as other donors to create that connection. Have you done the proper preparation in advance of the actual meeting solicitation by defining roles? I can't tell you how often individuals or teams sort of think that they can be effective by winging it. And I said winging it before, but what better way to say it? Just sort of like, yeah, put me in the room with this person. I'll do it. I'll figure it out. I got this covered, which is, sometimes okay if you have that understanding and trust with the solicitor, that they've done this before, that they know what they're doing, that they have the kind of relationship where pre-planning and preparation isn't as significantly important. But I never assume that. I always go in defining roles carefully, briefing the players that are going to be involved, and making sure everyone knows who's going to say what and when. Not the ultimate and last consideration, but an important one is the kind of collateral that you're bringing with you or preparing for these meetings. Are you going to prepare a slide deck? Are you going to show them a video? Are you going to use digital media in any way? Have you thought through recognition and done everything that you possibly can to bring this request to life, making it as personal and bespoke, as I said before, as possible? One of the areas that I think you can often find yourself with the most holes is in your case for support, and sort of in the rationale that you're bringing forward, the initiative and the messaging associated with it for why this ask is being delivered to this person at this point in time. And we say, that official story of why you need support, private support, has to have some vision, some lift to it, has to be inspiring, has to be urgent, a call to action that is more immediate than necessarily long term. And you're telling a story, so you need to tell a great story about how this initiative fits into the history of the organization, how it fits into the future of the organization, why it's so urgent today, what it's going to allow you to do in the future, and specifically how this person can help measurably move that vision forward, or the mission of the organization, the particular project forward in a significant and impactful way. And oftentimes, organizations haven't thought through all of the particulars. Like, for example, you ask for $100,000 from someone to fund a building, right? Okay, great. Where's the building going to be located? How big is this building? How many floors are in this building? How many offices are going to be in this building? How many people are going to be in this building? How many people are going, how many clients are going to be served in this building on an annual basis? What's it going to cost the organization to keep this building going on an annual basis if it's a new building added to your campus? Is that affordable for you? Where are you going to come up with that additional $50,000 a year or $300,000 a year to run this building? You know, people will get pretty granular with their questions and their FAQs. So, you know, you need to be prepared for those potential questions that donors ask, or to give them the answers in the first place. So that's what I mean about making sure that you're prepared, that you have the answers, that you don't have holes in your case for support. One of the other realities that I find in major gifts is that there just isn't enough activity. People ask me often, like, why does a campaign fail? And, you know, there are certain answers like, you know, oftentimes leadership just isn't strong enough to carry the effort forward, right? I know that to be true. But when I look at campaigns that have relatively strong leadership, good case, prospects, et cetera, 9 times out of 10, they are failing for a lack of activity. There aren't enough calls, there aren't enough visits, there aren't enough asks. And the pace and the level of contacts and moves, everything else that we were defining earlier, just are insufficient to achieve the goal that has been set out, at least in the timeline that's been set out. So we often focus in the major gift work that we do on tracking activity, measuring activity. And I actually don't remember if there is a slide or not to this, but we're firm believers in setting aside time, protected time, whether you call it prime time calling or whatever it might be. But, you know, if you don't have that protected time in your calendar every week or even every day for calls, for visits, for the other types of work that are necessary to move major gift activity forward, it ain't gonna work, right? So the major gift officer that will allow meeting after meeting, like internal meeting after meeting, interfere with the work of the basic work of outreach, engagement, making calls, scheduling meetings, going out on visits, all of those kinds of things can really interfere with progress. And so you have to protect that time and keep it sacred. See, primetime calling. I should have known. There it is. You know, protect that time. Keep it sacred. Okay. So I guess part of the rationale for this training is to highlight some of the key ingredients of major gifts. And I've always said that if I have an extraordinary individual, an extraordinary leader, I'm pretty confident that I can raise money for almost anything. I've seen organizations that have had to raise money for debt, for misuse of funds, replenishing because of misuse of funds, those kinds of things. But the strength of the leadership that was involved in those efforts was so extraordinary that they were successful. And so I want to make sure that in this work that you recognize that it's not always you as the major gift officer, let's say, that is the right person to be making an ask or for moving a donor forward. You might be assigned to someone in your portfolio. You might have the responsibility of shepherding a relationship forward. But at the end of the day, I personally might not be the right person to ask another person for a gift. Even if I'm an important person within the institution, it's better to find the right person or right team to do this sort of important work. So what do I mean? If I'm a major gift officer and there's a particular individual in my portfolio who I don't just really feel a close connection to, I've had a hard time making that connection, doesn't mean you have to, you might be the only person that has a major gift portfolio in your institution, so you don't have the option of pushing it on to someone else. You have to move the needle, right? So you start approaching other people to help you move the relationship forward. So that's what I would mean about choosing and training the right team. If it's not you that's going to do it, who else do you need to bring forward on a per individual basis to move the relationship forward to get to the end result? It might be the executive director, it might be the board chair, it might be another volunteer, it might be a donor who you've co-opted to help you, but better to find the right team, the right people to put in a room with someone than to fully understand that you're just not the right person to do that. And we often say that, in selecting the right team, it is someone that has a close relationship, is a peer, is someone that is respected by that prospective donor. There are lots of other, potential factors that might go into it for the individual relationship, but it should be, one or a few people who do have the capacity to engage that person in a meaningful way. And with the right team, pretty much anything is achievable. I talk often about making sure that you're cultivating appropriately. Again, if we go back to some of the early slides, cultivation being that opportunity to get someone to be more aware of the organization. So in that vein, it's incredibly important to understand that people don't necessarily want to be cultivated. They don't necessarily gravitate to cultivation. So you have to sort of make it fun. You have to figure out ways that you can get people to be engaged. And a lot of organizations can do that through volunteering. They give them access to particular activities that they wouldn't otherwise be able to join. They make it incredibly relevant to the prospective donor, something that is a match. So for example, if I'm an IT professional and I'm asked for my advice relative to this organization's IT infrastructure, there's a connection there. There's a relevance that's created, a rationale. There has to be inspiration created. The person on the other end can't be bored with what you're trying to do or the organization. They have to be thought. There has to be this dynamic created where the person is like, wow, that seems cool. I want to know more about that. And to the point about that IT person that I just referenced, engagement is incredibly important, and the statistics suggest to us that the more someone is engaged in a meaningful way with the organization, the higher the probability is of not just giving, but giving a significant gift. So if they're on the board, the chances increase dramatically that someone will make a major gift. If they are a volunteer, the chances increase. If they are on a campaign steering committee, right, that's probably the best one. But there's all kinds of different ways that you can create the engagement, which is so important to creating a higher probability of major gift support. Mentoring, lending expertise, invitations to speak, joining sort of CEO roundtables, special VIP events, to engagements. Those are all ways to create connections and engagement that are just critically important. I'm going to start speeding up on some of these additional slides because they've kind of come out in a variety of ways over the course of the presentation, but still important to reinforce. One is the thought of impact and what the outcomes are of a gift and of an initiative that is being pursued. I think we have been forced, many of us, to get more serious about the impact and measuring impact and reporting on impact as a result of the requirements put upon us by foundations. Now, what's interesting is I don't necessarily think that most organizations respond or think of the responsibility to share back results and impact and measurements of those and updates in the same way with individuals or even corporations, to that matter, as we do with foundations. Why? Well, it's not required, right? But just because it's not required doesn't mean it isn't a great idea or doesn't make a huge difference. So if there is a way that you can institutionalize a certain path of stewardship, let's say, and reporting to individual major gift donors to the same degree that you would understand foundations to require you to do, then I believe you're going to, think about your requests more strategically to individuals. You're going to put more time and thought into those requests where they'll be more detailed and thoughtful. And B, you'll do a better job of stewardship and communication through those gifts. And the donor's going to feel better about their connection to you, about the outcome of their generosity, and their willingness to think about the next extraordinary gift based on the positive experience that they've had before. Back to the idea of bespoke, I think customization of collateral for major gift donors is really important and necessary. So let's often try to create things that are seen to be tailored for these individuals and the work that's being done. I mean, it's not feasible to often create truly tailored materials each and every time. But if you have great templates, if you have the capacity to customize existing collateral, then, by all means, it's extraordinarily helpful to do so. And oftentimes people will ask me, well, what kinds of materials do I need to bring to a meeting with me if I'm making a request, a major gift request of someone? And my response will vary. It will depend on who's asking. It will depend on whether you have the intent to use any materials during the meeting or not. I often find that volunteers and even sometimes development professionals need some collateral to help guide the conversation, because sometimes we get very nervous in pursuing these conversations. So sometimes if you're able to bring out a presentation deck or have something to follow on an iPad, it keeps you focused on the architecture or the arc of the meeting, and not forgetting any core details, not skipping any of the key messages that you want to communicate. So, I wouldn't hesitate to bring collateral with me to a meeting and use it if it benefits you as the solicitor, or if it might enhance the meeting by virtue of them being able to see what it is you're talking about or understand better what it is you're talking about. But I always try to bring something with me. Might even be a gift, but I never come empty-handed. But I try to create something that I can at least leave behind with them that often is specific to the request, and that shows and demonstrates that I put a lot of time, attention, effort, and energy into this work, that I didn't just throw things together and bring it with me straight from the office, that we spent as an organization a substantial amount of time thinking through what would be best to put in front of them as an investable opportunity. So I think that strategy, works very often. And what went through my brain as I was saying this is that I don't think what I've said often or prior is that a lot of times these ask meetings are coming with them a very specific approach for a specific amount of money. We talked about specific programs and hoping that someone will invest in a program, but quite often these requests are asking for a dollar amount. Would you consider giving or consider investing $100,000 in this particular initiative? And then the proposal might have a letter to that effect, or a presentation deck customized around the impact of a $100,000 gift, the kind of recognition that you would receive, right? So you might use it, you might just hold on to it and say at the end of the meeting, everything that we talked about here today is here in the packet as well. So if you wanted to jump into some of these materials and understand a little bit more about what a gift at this level means and the impact it can have, I would invite you to review this. Sometimes asks are made in ranges of amounts. Would you consider a gift of $50,000 to $250,000? Often you need to explain if it's a one-time gift or if it's a pledge payable over time, or if you intend for this to be a gift through their will or estate or trust. So you need to think through some of these strategies. But a major gift could be something that's payable over many years. Often in campaigns they are, but sometimes you need the money tomorrow. So the needs of the organization have to be very transparent. Don't assume anything going into a meeting. Don't assume that they know that a gift would be needed before the end of the fiscal year, or that they could pledge it over 3 to 5 years, or that you would accept a blended gift between an estate and cash. You can't assume anything. You have to educate. You have to lay it out in plain detail for them and give them all the options that are available, including oftentimes the ways that they can make a gift. Like some people just don't know that they can give appreciated stock to fulfill a gift. It's not always writing a check. Sometimes it's gifting a car. Sometimes it's gifting a house. Sometimes it's giving stock. Sometimes it's making you the beneficiary of an insurance policy or 401k. There's all kinds of different ways. Spell it out for them. You have to have answers to all of these questions. I mentioned a few times before that there is, I didn't want to overemphasize the ask as part of the major gift process, because, and I've often heard people say this, if you've done your job well in terms of the cultivation steps and the engagement pre-ask, the ask is a little bit more of a formality. There's less guesswork that's involved in the actual ask itself. And so I put this picture here of an engagement ceremony because I don't think this person down on their knees proposing is expecting a no, right? There's probably a lot of conversations that have gone into this ask prior to this moment, including, is there a special place? Is there a special date? Is there a ring type? Do you think you'd want to get engaged this year, next year? Would you say yes if I asked? These are the kinds of questions that literally get asked by major gift officers to their prospective donors before the ask is made, right? Like, hey, would you have any interest in supporting our housing initiative? No? Okay. Well, maybe I can come back next meeting and we can explore, what some of the other interests are. Well, I guess I'm not going to be asking for the housing initiative, right? So things are tested all the time. Hopefully going into an ask that you have a reasonable opportunity for a positive response. If you don't, I would actually wonder, or I want you to pause and say, have I done enough? Am I prematurely asking for this gift? Have I earned the right to ask for this gift? Those are hard questions, right? And sometimes you just have to take a chance, and that's okay too. But failure is always a part of this. But I do whatever I can to eliminate the failure rate as many times as I can. But I would also say, and I don't want to belabor this because I could do an entire hour and a half presentation just on the ways to make an ask, the statements to make, the question that you would want to pose, the intricate details about how you're supposed to follow up that ask, all of those kinds of things. But let me quickly just say that you should know what you're going to say before you say it. You probably want to practice and rehearse the speech that you're going to give. If you're only going to give yourself a rehearsal around a couple of things, maybe it's the sentence or two where you're really making the ask. And as you've heard from many people, the ask is meant to come with a response that is from the prospective donor, not from you, right? So you've all been probably trained to make the ask and be quiet, right? And the problem is most people don't make the right ask to allow a time of reflection and where that silence is anything but awkward. So if you ask the right question, pose the right question, you will get a response, right? And oftentimes I am not as cut and dry as some people might be to say, hey, will you give $50,000? Because I think, that could be a very awkward silence if it's allowed sort of to manifest itself. My questions are often more like, hey, I'm not exactly sure that that this is the perfect ask of you at the perfect time, but I really would like you to consider and think about a gift of $50,000 this year to help us with our housing initiative. Is that something that you can consider? And the question, is that something considered, sort of takes the edge off. Will you give me $50,000, right? So I'm trying to take the edge off the uncomfortable nature of this mainly for volunteers and others who are not meeting with people that they're best friends with or they have a great relationship with. And so, I think it's important to think carefully about how you would approach the ask and do so in a way that you can make it as comfortable as possible for everyone and receive back a thoughtful response. And the thoughtful response is yes, no, maybe, I need more time, not at that level, all kinds of different things. But as I said earlier, you can make a perfect ask and still not get the answer you want, right? So don't overthink it, right? you're not doing this one time, you're doing it many, 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 many times in order to be successful. And this is usually where I say failure is a part of fundraising. And you are going to probably fail more often than you succeed in fundraising if you're doing it right. If you've never failed in fundraising, you're doing something wrong. And if you're successful 3 or 4 times out of every ask in terms of getting what you're asking for, you, like a professional baseball player, will be in the Hall of Fame, right? So just, be prepared for no. It's often a no to this today, right now, as one client has famously ingrained in my head. A no is just a prelude to a yes. So don't think of it as a no forever. Think of it as a no right now. And hey, maybe I just sharpened my pencil a little more on getting closer to what will really motivate this person to say yes. I went over all of this stuff before. Proper stewardship is critically important, even on the annual gift side or annual giving side, but also in the major gift side, making people feel like they've had an impact, that they are appreciated, that they are a part of something important, that they've done something really wonderful. All of those kinds of things are incredibly valuable. And I'm going to end with this slide, not the one that sort of talks about all the things to avoid, because I've talked about plenty of things not to do. But I'm going to stop here with the presentation, which is really about attitude. And what I've come to realize is that there is a power in maintaining a positive attitude as a fundraiser. It can be a difficult job. And if you kind of allow the circumstances, the no's, the negativity of some people, quite honestly, to influence you in this work, in this line of work, it is fairly easy to become a bit negative, demoralized, but you can't let that happen. A successful major gift officer is probably defined more as an eternal optimist than maybe any other characteristic, right? I think that I am often successful because I don't know how to stop thinking positively. I can't stop thinking about the best case scenario. I'm prepared for the worst, mind you, but I'm often, prepared for good things to happen and celebrate those when they do. So I know for all of you that are in major gift work or exploring major gift work or want to get into it, that it can be extraordinarily exciting and fun and rewarding. But there are going to be moments where it seems like the hardest job you've ever had in your life. And I think it's in those moments, if you can maintain a positive attitude, that you will continue to be extraordinarily successful. So just keep that positive attitude because it means a lot in this work. So with that being said, I'll skip that slide and I'll just say thank you for giving me the opportunity to share a few things about major gifts with you over the course of the last hour or so. Let me open it up to questions if there are any.
We did have one question in the chat, and it was about building your team. And the question is to drill down a little bit deeper and to say, what are some of the qualities that you're looking for when you're building that team?
Yeah. Well, I do like people that are easy to engage with, are friendly. That sounds so basic, but just because someone has a particular position of authority doesn't mean that they relate well to other people. If you've worked in an academic or medical environment, sometimes the smartest people are often the most reclusive and the hardest to connect with. So, finding someone that you believe is going to develop a strong connection with that prospective donor. You could imagine them being friends. That's one. I think it's helpful to have someone that is confident in themselves and passionate about the program. Among that team, there has to be at least one person that can verbalize the request, that isn't going to wilt under the pressure, which is significant oftentimes. I mean, this is not natural mechanics for people to make an ask, right? So it takes someone with some special DNA to be able to do this really well. But I hope that is somewhat helpful. I mean, in an ideal situation, it is an institutional leader, whether that's the executive director or someone C-level, C-suite level, or board chair or a board member that can help facilitate some of that work if you're joining it with a staff member.
We had a couple other questions here. One of them is about the environment where the ask takes place. And the question is social, personal, business, entertainment. Is there a best environment?
Yeah, I think whatever environment is most comfortable to the prospective donor is the way to go. There's nothing wrong with inviting someone to the office, the organization's office, to have that. I mean, I think that's a safe and reasonable space to make an ask. It doesn't have to be on their turf, so to speak, right? You're going to know what the best location is by virtue of the relationship that you've developed or the connection that you've developed in advance. I think when in doubt, ask them, where they'd like to meet. And let's also remember that these asks happen in unusual ways and in unusual circumstances. I am not the person that's so rigid to say it has to be like this, it has to be like that. I've known plenty of conversations that have ultimately become an ask for a significant gift with the invitation to submit a proposal as a follow-up, conversation that is something like this. I was hoping that you might be open to our request of $50,000 for our housing initiative. Would it be okay if I sent you over a proposal for that in the next day or two? Right. So it can happen in different ways, right? And I want to be open to that depending on the person, but let's make sure that the person that you're talking to is comfortable. And obviously COVID era opened up all kinds of additional considerations that we're going to have to grapple with over the next 6 to 12 months.
Diana, you want to build?
I was going to say, and by the way, there's lots of proof that major gifts can be asked for via Zoom. So we've definitely proven that.
Well, that was the question there. Have you ever asked on Zoom as a follow-up? But I think there's a couple other. Diana, you want to kick off one of the other questions?
Yeah. Do we have time for just one more, or do you want two? Two? Okay. So there was a question in here if there are generational differences in the ask.
Yes, I think absolutely. Different generational asks. I think I explored that a little bit. I feel like those donors that have committed to an organization for decades have a stronger allegiance to those organizations and are less likely to depart from them through leadership changes, through different life events of an organization. So, whereas I think that younger generations of donors, maybe because they haven't been attached to a particular institution long enough, are more inclined to continue to hunt for an organization that meets their particular interests and needs. I think there's a particular, or a greater opportunity to create relationships with younger donors who are trying to find their charity of choice or charities of choice. I think the older you get, the more committed you become, oftentimes, to a certain number of agencies and want to aggregate your resources into fewer of those organizations and concentrate your giving.
Okay. Yeah, that's great. I had an opportunity to do a feasibility study over the summer, last summer, and the individual did not support that charity and said his strategy was narrow, deep, and long. And yes, he was very nice, gave great feedback, but he wasn't going to add anything new into his charities that he supported.
Narrow, deep, and long.
Yeah, I like that. So there is a question about the risk-taking qualities of a major gift prospect that you alluded to. And you want to, maybe we'll finish off with this one.
Yeah, no, that would be good. Where do I see risk taking being manifested? I think often I see major gift donors willing to invest in the creation of new programs, which is risky because those might not pan out. I see donors often exploring a willingness to invest in capacity building. And I say that because most of these donors that are less risk averse are entrepreneurial themselves, have built businesses, understand what it takes to grow a business, are not immune to the idea of you have to spend money to make money. And so I would encourage all of you to kind of explore the temperature of various people in capacity building activities, like the addition of staff and giving them a runway, whether it's development staff or program staff or things like that, right? Whatever you as an organization feel like might help you grow your capacity to do more, there's an opportunity for donors to fund that growth. And that's risk capital, which doesn't often, hardly ever kind of exist in the budget. So this is sort of incremental to most budgets. Like, oh, you're going to give me $100,000 to hire someone for a couple of years to grow this program? Awesome. And so I would explore those opportunities because I think donors are more open to the 10x return that might be possible as a result of their particular gift.
All right. Well, Chris, thank you so much for this encore performance. And we're glad that we were helping you build your legacy by making this, memorializing this clip on our website. And thank you again for all that you do for the chapter.
Thank you, Michelle. So kind of you. And thanks everyone for being a kind audience.
Bye-bye.